A massive Arctic fortress is silently building over Canada right now, and what meteorologists are seeing in the data is absolutely terrifying. While millions of Americans are finally feeling relief from weeks of brutal cold, the atmospheric conditions forming above us are setting up for what could be an even more dangerous blow than what we have already endured. I'm talking about a weather pattern so unstable that scientists are calling it unprecedented. Right now, as people across the eastern United States are stepping outside without heavy coats for the first time in weeks, the same homeless individuals who have been fighting for survival on the streets are still facing life-threatening conditions every single night. In New York City alone, emergency outreach teams are finding people who have not survived each time temperatures drop, and the crisis is not slowing down even as some areas warm up. The brutal reality is that while Chicago might hit 60 degrees this week, there are still thousands of people across America without proper shelter, and the weather system building over our northern border could send us right back into emergency conditions within days. This is not just another winter storm. This is a sustained atmospheric crisis that has already claimed over 170 lives across multiple states, and the worst might still be ahead of us. Here's what's happening right now that should scare everyone. The polar vortex that broke apart above the Arctic has created something meteorologists call a split system. Half of this massive cold air circulation is positioned over northeastern Canada, and it is intensifying. The other half is spinning over northern Asia. When these systems are intact and centered over the pole, they keep the coldest air locked up north. When they split like this, all that Arctic air has nowhere to go but south. The temporary warming we are seeing across the eastern states right now is actually making the situation more dangerous. It is creating a false sense of security while the atmosphere continues building toward another potential disaster. Weather models are showing a Canadian cold pool strengthening significantly over the next 10 days. And if it breaks free, we could see temperatures that make the recent crisis look mild in comparison. What makes this particularly frightening is how quickly conditions can change with a disrupted polar vortex. We have seen cities go from record cold to near record warmth in a matter of days, and that same volatility means we could see the reverse happen just as fast. Dallas hit the 70s this week after being locked in ice just days ago. Washington, D.C. felt like summer after residents endured some of the longest cold spells in 150 years. Atmospheric scientists are warning that this warmth is temporary and potentially deceptive. The homeless population across affected cities is bearing the brunt of this ongoing crisis. Even during the current warm-up, outreach workers are finding people in severe medical distress from weeks of exposure. In Nashville, teams transported over 1,500 people to emergency warming centers, but they are still discovering individuals who could not make it to safety. Emergency rooms are treating cases of severe frostbite, hypothermia complications, and respiratory problems that developed during the prolonged cold exposure. Mississippi is still dealing with infrastructure damage that is making people vulnerable to whatever comes next. Nearly 300,000 customers lost power during the worst of the storms, and some rural areas went weeks without electricity. When the next system arrives, these same communities will be even less prepared because their infrastructure remains compromised. Utility companies are racing to replace hundreds of damaged poles and transformers, but the work is far from complete. The science behind what is happening is genuinely alarming. The stratospheric sudden warming events that shattered the polar vortex this winter have been more intense and more frequent than anything we have seen in decades. Atmospheric temperatures 30 kilometers above the Arctic surged 50 degrees above normal in some areas. This kind of disruption does not just fix itself. The effects can persist for months, creating these chaotic swings between extreme cold and unusual warmth. Right now, meteorologists are tracking atmospheric blocking patterns that are keeping this instability locked in place. Instead of normal west to east weather movement, we are seeing these massive high and low pressure systems that just sit in place for weeks. The result is record heat in some areas and record cold in others, with very little middle ground. The economic damage from this ongoing crisis is accelerating faster than anyone anticipated. Natural gas prices are still hovering near record levels because the infrastructure damage has reduced production capacity. The agricultural sector is facing massive losses as livestock operations struggled to maintain heating and water systems during the worst cold. Transportation networks are still recovering from the thousands of flight cancellations and highway closures that paralyzed commerce for weeks. But here's what's really concerning emergency managers across the country. The federal disaster response system is already stretched to its limits by this crisis. 12 states have federal emergency declarations in place. More than 5,400 National Guard members are deployed across 15 states. FEMA has distributed millions of emergency meals and hundreds of thousands of blankets. If we get hit with another major event while we are still recovering from this one, the response capacity might not be adequate. Please share in the comments if you are in one of the affected areas and how your community is holding up. Reports indicate some places are still dealing with power outages and infrastructure problems from the recent storms. I want to know what the real situation looks like on the ground where you are. The contrast between different regions continues to be absolutely mind-boggling. While the eastern United States has been locked in this crisis, the western states are facing their own emergency, with record-low snowpack levels. California's Sierra Nevada mountains have snow levels 70% below normal. Salt Lake City has received 1/10 of an inch of snow for the entire season. That is 33 inches below average. The Colorado River Basin snowpack is approaching record minimums, threatening water supplies for 40 million people. This extreme regional difference is actually part of the same atmospheric pattern that is creating the eastern crisis. The jet stream has been locked in this massive U-shaped configuration, creating a heat dome over the west and a cold trough over the east. Neither pattern can break free from the other, so both extremes just keep intensifying. Canada is dealing with its own version of this crisis, and that is directly connected to what is threatening the United States. Toronto recorded its snowiest month in recorded history in January. One Ontario community saw temperatures drop to minus 43 degrees Celsius, the coldest reading in 42 years. The same cold air mass that devastated eastern Canada is now building strength for a potential southward surge. The infrastructure lessons from this crisis are becoming clear, and they are not encouraging for what might come next. Texas succeeded in keeping their power grid stable during their recent winter storm, proving that infrastructure improvements work when implemented properly. But other states saw massive failures. Tennessee's power grid recorded its highest outage count in history. Mississippi experienced what officials called complete grid failure in some counties. The timeline for recovery varies dramatically depending on location and infrastructure quality. Some areas restored power within days, while others went weeks without electricity. The communities that are still dealing with damage from the recent storms are the ones most vulnerable to whatever the atmosphere throws at them next. Emergency shelters across affected states are still operating at capacity, and many are preparing for the possibility of another surge in demand. The strain on resources has been enormous. New York City's shelter system processed over 1,400 additional people during the worst of the crisis. Kentucky activated 113 warming centers. Mississippi opened 93 emergency shelters across 51 counties. But shelter capacity is just one part of the challenge. Medical facilities have been overwhelmed with cold-related injuries and illnesses. Emergency departments have seen increases in cases of frostbite, hypothermia, carbon monoxide poisoning from improper heating, and cardiac events triggered by extreme cold exposure. If another wave hits while hospitals are still dealing with these cases, the medical system could face serious strain. The psychological toll of this prolonged crisis does not show up in weather statistics, but it is very real for millions of people. Families who lost loved ones during the storms are still grieving. Communities that saw their infrastructure fail are dealing with ongoing anxiety about the next weather emergency. Children who experienced power outages and dangerous cold are showing signs of trauma and stress. If this information is helping you understand what is really happening with our weather right now, please share this video with anyone who needs to stay informed about these developing conditions. The more people who understand the real risks we are facing, the better prepared our communities can be for whatever comes next. The upcoming forecast is where this situation gets truly scary. Multiple weather models are showing the potential for the Canadian Arctic air mass to break free from its current position and surge southward again. The timing is uncertain, but the strength of this potential system could exceed what we have already experienced. When atmospheric scientists use words like unprecedented and dangerous, that should get everyone's attention. The jet stream pattern that is driving all of this chaos shows no signs of stabilizing. If anything, the blocking pattern seems to be getting stronger and more persistent. This means the extreme regional differences could continue for weeks or even months. Areas that have been warm could suddenly turn cold, and regions that are finally warming up could get slammed back into emergency conditions. International weather agencies are now issuing warnings about the global implications of what is happening over North America. The same atmospheric disruption is affecting weather patterns across the Northern Hemisphere. Europe is dealing with its own version of unstable conditions. Asia is seeing temperature swings that mirror what is happening here. The agricultural implications are becoming more serious every day that this pattern continues. Livestock operations across the affected states suffered massive losses during the recent cold. Crop planning for the spring growing season is being complicated by uncertainty about when and if normal weather patterns will return. Food supply chains that were disrupted by transportation problems during the storms are still working to get back to normal operations. Energy markets remain volatile because of ongoing uncertainty about heating demand and supply capacity. Natural gas production facilities that were damaged during the extreme cold are still being repaired. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve has been used to help stabilize fuel supplies in affected areas. If another major cold outbreak occurs, energy systems that are already stressed could face even more serious challenges. The climate science community is intensely studying this event because it represents something they have not seen before in the modern era. The combination of multiple stratospheric warming events, persistent blocking patterns, and extreme regional contrasts is providing new data about how the atmosphere behaves under these conditions. What they are learning could change how we prepare for future winter emergencies. Looking ahead to the rest of February and into early March, the key question is not whether we will see more extreme weather, but how extreme it will be and where it will hit hardest. The atmospheric instability that created this crisis is still active. The polar vortex remains fractured and unpredictable. The conditions that allowed such devastating cold to penetrate so far south are still in place. Emergency management officials are urging people not to let the current warm-up create a false sense of security. The supplies and preparations that helped people survive the recent crisis should stay in place. Communication plans should remain active. Community support networks should stay ready to help vulnerable neighbors. This winter crisis has shown us that our weather systems can change faster and more dramatically than most people realized was possible. The temporary relief we are experiencing right now might be just that, temporary. The atmosphere above us remains unstable, dangerous, and completely unpredictable. What happens next could determine whether this winter of 2026 goes down as a crisis we survived or a disaster that forever changed how we think about extreme weather in America. The polar vortex just completely shattered above our heads, and what is happening right now across America will shock you. I am talking about a 70-degree temperature swing happening in the same cities within just days, while people are still losing their lives on the streets from the brutal cold that has been gripping half the country. Right now, as I am recording this, Chicago is preparing to go from 11 degrees below zero just weeks ago to possibly hitting 60 degrees this week. That is not normal, folks. That is the atmosphere literally breaking apart above us, and the consequences are still unfolding in ways that will affect millions of Americans through the rest of this winter. But here is what is really terrifying. While the eastern United States is finally getting this temporary warm-up, there is a massive Arctic cold pool building over Canada right now that could send us right back into another deep freeze by the end of this month. The same scientists who have been tracking this crisis are warning that we might get one more brutal blast before winter finally releases its grip. Let me tell you what's been happening to real people while this weather chaos has been unfolding. In New York City alone, 18 people have lost their lives outdoors since this crisis began. 18 families destroyed because folks had nowhere warm to go when temperatures plummeted. The city deployed 400 outreach workers, running buses around the clock, checking on people every 2 hours, but they still couldn't reach everyone. One night, emergency services received 5,700 calls from people in distress from the cold, and there weren't enough ambulances for 300 of those calls. This is not just a New York problem. Nashville transported over 1,500 people to emergency warming shelters. Mississippi opened 93 warming centers across 51 counties. Kentucky activated 113 warming locations. But even with all these efforts, the vulnerable are still suffering the most from this atmospheric nightmare. What makes this situation so dangerous is how the weather patterns are behaving completely differently across the country. While the eastern states have been locked in this historic deep freeze, the western United States has been experiencing record-breaking warmth and the worst snow drought in decades. Phoenix hit 83 degrees, while North Carolina was buried under more than 2 feet of snow. Think about that contrast. It's like two different planets existing side by side. The science behind this is genuinely frightening. 3 separate warming events have attacked the polar vortex this winter, and that is almost unheard of. The atmospheric temperatures 30 kilometers above the Arctic surged 40 to 50 degrees above normal. When the polar vortex gets disrupted like this, it does not just bounce back, it stays broken, sending these chaotic weather patterns spinning across continents for weeks or even months. Right now, meteorologists are watching something they call stratospheric sudden warming, and it is confirmed to be happening around mid-February. The polar vortex is literally splitting in half, with one piece moving toward Asia and another settling over northeastern Canada. This kind of atmospheric disruption typically takes 10 to 20 days to affect weather at ground level, which means we could see another round of brutal conditions by late February or early March. The human cost has been staggering. Over 170 people did not survive this crisis across multiple states. Mississippi lost 29 residents. Tennessee saw between 23 and 29 lives lost. New Jersey recorded 20 fatalities. These are not just numbers. In Nashville, a 92-year-old man was found in his home after the indoor temperature dropped to 47 degrees. In Texas, 3 young brothers, ages 6, 8, and 9, fell through ice while playing, and their mother could not save them despite desperately trying to pull them from the water as the ice kept breaking beneath her. The infrastructure damage has been unlike anything we have seen since the Texas freeze 5 years ago. Over 1 million customers lost power at the peak of this crisis. Natural gas prices hit $30 per unit, the highest on record. Mississippi saw nearly 300,000 customers without electricity, with some areas warned they would be in the dark for weeks, not days. 400 poles, 90 transformers, and over 1,400 spans of wire were damaged across Louisiana and Mississippi alone. But here is something that might surprise you. Texas, which failed so catastrophically during the last major winter crisis, actually succeeded this time. The grid held perfectly. Battery storage provided over 7,000 megawatts at one point, powering the equivalent of nearly 2 million homes. The infrastructure improvements they made after their previous disaster worked when they were tested again. Transportation across the country was devastated. Nearly 20,000 flights were canceled during the worst storms. American Airlines called it the most disruptive weather event in their 100-year history. On the roads, multiple hundred-vehicle pileups closed major interstates. Michigan saw over 100 vehicles involved in crashes on a single stretch of highway. Drop a comment and let me know where you are located and how this weather has been affecting your area. I am seeing reports from viewers across the country dealing with everything from record snowfall to unprecedented warmth, and I want to hear what you are experiencing firsthand. What is happening right now is this dramatic warming trend across the eastern United States. The National Weather Service confirms that an expansive high-pressure system is building from the southern plains to the Midwest, bringing widespread above normal temperatures. We are talking about cities that were experiencing life-threatening cold just days ago, now preparing for temperatures that will feel like a heat wave. Dallas could hit the 70s or even the 80s this week. Washington, D.C. is expected to reach the 50s, which forecasters are describing as feeling like summer after what residents have endured. Chicago might see temperatures near 60 degrees, which represents a 70-degree swing from where they were just weeks ago. But here is the critical part that everyone needs to understand. This warm-up is temporary. A major Canadian Arctic cold pool is intensifying right now, and the same atmospheric disruption that caused this crisis is still active above us. The polar vortex remains fractured and unstable. Scientists who have been tracking this event are divided on what comes next. Some are calling this latest disruption a Canadian warming rather than a full split, while others are warning that we are seeing a strong sudden stratospheric warming that could trigger another major cold intrusion. The difference between these scenarios could mean the difference between winter ending early or extending well into March with another round of dangerous conditions. The western United States is finally seeing some changes too. Heavy storms are expected to hit California starting around mid-February, bringing desperately needed rain and snow to areas experiencing the lowest snow cover in satellite records. Oregon, Colorado, and Utah all reported record-low snowpack levels. Salt Lake City had received only 1/10 of an inch of snow for the entire season, 33 inches below average. This dramatic contrast between regions highlights something unprecedented about this winter. The atmospheric patterns have been so extreme that it is like watching two completely different climate zones existing simultaneously across North America. The jet stream has been locked in this massive U-shaped pattern, keeping the western states abnormally warm, while funneling Arctic air deep into areas that rarely see such extreme conditions. Canada has been hit just as hard. Toronto received its heaviest single-day snowfall on record, with nearly 2 feet falling in one day. January became Toronto's snowiest month in recorded history. Cross-border trade has been severely disrupted, with major bridge crossings operating at only 20% of normal truck volume. The emergency response has been unprecedented. 12 federal emergency declarations were approved across affected states. Over 5,400 National Guard members were activated across 15 states. FEMA pre-staged 300 generators, 7 million meals, 3 million liters of water, and over 600,000 blankets before the worst storms hit. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is how unprepared many areas were for this level of extreme weather. The Southeast and Mid-South bore the brunt of conditions they rarely experience. North Carolina endured 2 major storms in 1 week, with some areas receiving over 25 inches of snow. Charlotte recorded its 4th highest single-day snowfall since 1880. The records that were broken during this event tell the story of just how extreme this has been. Florida saw temperatures that shattered records from 1936. Little Rock, Arkansas received 6 inches of snow, breaking a record from 1899. Dayton, Ohio logged over 12 inches in 24 hours, setting an all-time single-day record. New York City saw its biggest one-day accumulation in 3 years. Lake Erie reached 96% ice coverage, the highest since 1996. 56% of the entire continental United States was covered in snow at the peak, the second highest coverage in 20 years. These are not just weather statistics. They represent conditions that pushed infrastructure, emergency services, and human endurance to their limits. If you found this information helpful for understanding what is happening with our weather right now, hit that like button and share this with anyone who needs to know about these developing conditions. Information like this could literally help save lives as we head into whatever comes next with this unstable weather pattern. The climate science community is deeply divided on what this event tells us about future winters. Some research suggests that Arctic ice loss is making these polar vortex disruptions more common, while other studies argue that cold extremes should actually become less frequent as the planet warms. What is undeniable is that this winter has pushed weather records to extremes we have not seen in decades. Looking ahead to the rest of February and early March, the key question is whether this warming reprieve will hold, or if we are about to see another dangerous plunge. The same atmospheric dynamics that created this crisis are still active. The Madden-Julian Oscillation, a powerful tropical weather pattern, has been interfering with the typical progression of these events, and that interference is expected to weaken soon. Multiple forecast models are showing the potential for a significant cold outbreak by late February. If this happens, it could affect areas that are just starting to recover from the infrastructure damage and human toll of the current crisis. Emergency management officials across affected states are urging residents to remain prepared for the possibility of more severe weather. The economic impact is still being calculated, but early estimates suggest direct damages of over $4 billion, making this the first billion-dollar weather disaster of 2026. Some analysts are projecting total economic impact could reach over $100 billion when indirect costs are included, though other economists question whether those figures are accurate. What is certain is that this event has exposed vulnerabilities in our infrastructure and emergency response systems that will need to be addressed. The success of Texas in keeping their grid stable shows that improvements are possible, but the widespread power outages and communication failures in other states demonstrate how much work remains to be done. The human stories from this crisis will stay with us long after the weather returns to normal. Families who lost loved ones, communities that came together to help their most vulnerable residents, first responders who worked around the clock in dangerous conditions, and ordinary citizens who opened their homes to neighbors in need. As we move forward through the rest of this winter, the most important thing is staying informed about rapidly changing conditions and being prepared for whatever this unstable weather pattern might bring next. The polar vortex may be thousands of miles above us, but when it breaks apart like this, the effects reach every corner of our daily lives. The next few weeks will be critical for understanding whether this winter crisis is finally ending, or if we are just experiencing a temporary break before another dangerous turn in America's most unpredictable winter in years. Breaking news just came in. Meteorologists are now calling this winter situation a major issue, as the polar vortex is literally splitting in half right now, creating what experts are describing as the most dangerous atmospheric breakdown in years. What we are witnessing is not just extreme weather anymore. It is a complete atmospheric collapse that has already taken 153 lives and is putting millions of our most vulnerable neighbors at risk of freezing to death on our streets tonight. Right now, as I'm recording this, Central Park is sitting at 3 degrees Fahrenheit. That is actually colder than Antarctica. Dallas has been below freezing for over 200 consecutive hours straight. And here's what's really heartbreaking. Homeless shelters from Boston to Atlanta are turning people away because they are at maximum capacity. These are not just numbers, folks. These are real people sleeping outside in temperatures that can end a life within hours. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments and tell me what you are seeing outside your window. What is happening across America is absolutely unprecedented, and I want to know how this is affecting your community specifically. The science behind what's happening is terrifying. We have a confirmed stratospheric sudden warming event occurring 30 kilometers above the Arctic, where temperatures have spiked over 100 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. This is causing the polar vortex to split into 2 separate cores around February 15th. Think of it like a massive spinning wall of cold air that normally keeps Arctic temperatures locked up north. Except now that wall is breaking apart and sending pieces of the Arctic directly into our neighborhoods. Scientists at MIT are describing this polar vortex as doing its best stretching impression, continuously elongating and compressing. What that means for you and your family is that we are entering a phase where brutal cold can strike with very little warning, and it is going to keep happening through the rest of winter and potentially into March. In the past 72 hours alone, 10 states have received new winter storm warnings. Alaska is facing wind gusts up to 95 miles per hour. Montana's Cook City area is bracing for up to 20 inches of fresh snow. Massachusetts just got hit with another clipper system that dumped 6 more inches on areas already buried under previous storms. Chicago is experiencing its coldest weather in 7 years, with O'Hare Airport logging 500 delays and over 50 cancellations on February 7th. But here's what's really concerning. While all this is happening, our homeless population is facing a genuine survival crisis. In New York City, outreach teams have found 17 people who did not survive the cold since January 19th. In Chicago, officials opened additional overnight warming centers as wind chills hit -40 degrees, but thousands of people are still sleeping outdoors with nowhere safe to go. Social workers report that many people experiencing homelessness are avoiding overcrowded shelters because of safety concerns and are choosing to risk the deadly cold instead. Hit that like button right now if you think this information is important for people to know, because what is coming next could affect millions more lives, and sharing this could literally help save someone in your community. What makes this situation a major issue is not just the current conditions, it is what meteorologists are predicting for the next few weeks. An atmospheric interference called the Madden-Julian Oscillation is temporarily shielding parts of the central and eastern United States from the full effects of this polar vortex breakdown. That means we are going to see some relief through mid-February, with temperatures rebounding from single digits to the 30s and 40s in many areas. But folks, this is temporary relief, not the end of the crisis. The atmospheric protection that is currently shielding us will not last forever. Weather experts are warning that the connection between the stratosphere and the surface is forecast to re-establish, potentially opening the door to new rounds of dangerous cold in the last third of February and early March. Let us break down what's happening state by state, because this is affecting people completely differently depending on where you live. Florida has experienced some of the most bizarre conditions imaginable. Every official climate monitoring site broke or tied record lows for 2 consecutive days. 2,500 cold-stunned iguanas had to be collected in just 2 days, as they literally fell from trees across South Florida. Tennessee took a devastating hit to its infrastructure. Nashville Electric Service reported peak outages affecting 235,000 customers, roughly half their entire service territory. As of February 7th, over 27,000 customers were still in the dark. Families have been spending $400 or more on propane and generators just to stay warm in their own homes. Mississippi officials called this the worst winter storm since 1994. Nearly 300,000 customers lost power, with 25,000 still without electricity on February 5th, almost 2 weeks after the initial storm hit. But here is some good news that shows infrastructure can work when properly prepared. Texas showed resilience this time, after the devastating grid failures during the winter storm in 2021. Battery storage increased from 220 megawatts to 17,000 megawatts. At peak demand, batteries supplied 9.5% of total grid power. It proves that lessons learned from past disasters can make a real difference. The Northeast has faced cold that just would not quit. Washington, D.C. endured 233 consecutive hours below freezing, the longest streak since 1989. New York City deployed 60 warming shelters and 20 warming buses that circulated continuously, but the demand still far exceeded capacity. The economic impact of this crisis is staggering. Natural gas prices have surged 78%. Over 17,700 flights have been canceled across both storm systems combined. Total confirmed damages have reached $4 billion, with estimates including commerce disruption reaching $115 billion. Now, here's the really wild part about this whole situation. While the eastern half of the country has been experiencing this historic cold, the western United States has been hitting temperature records in the complete opposite direction. Montana reached 70 degrees. Los Angeles hit 88 degrees, hotter than typical summer days. 5 Montana cities recorded their warmest November through January period in weather history. The contrast is so extreme that we literally have record heat and record cold happening simultaneously in the same country. Meanwhile, the West is experiencing the lowest snow cover in 25 years of satellite records. The Sierra Nevada is sitting at just 50 to 70% of normal snowpack, setting up potential water supply issues for millions of people this summer. Share this video immediately with anyone who needs to understand what's happening, because the next phase of this crisis could catch people completely off guard if they are not prepared for it. Here is what everyone needs to understand about the next 30 days. Around February 15th, we are going to see the polar vortex complete its split into 2 distinct cores. Weather models are already showing signals for a potentially significant winter storm in the Northeast from February 15th to February 21st. The timing and track are still uncertain, but both major forecasting systems are flagging this threat. For the immediate future, folks in the Pacific Northwest and Northern California should prepare for beneficial storm activity around February 13th through February 15th. This could help with the severe drought and low snowpack conditions that have developed. The Northeast needs to stay alert. What makes this situation particularly dangerous going forward is that the February 15th polar vortex split could create a pattern where Arctic air becomes even more unstable. Instead of staying locked up in the Arctic where it belongs, we could see repeated southward plunges of extremely cold air through the rest of winter and into early spring. The atmospheric setup is primed for additional storm development. For our most vulnerable neighbors experiencing homelessness, this has been a true life-or-death situation that is far from over. Boston shelters have been turning away people every night because they simply run out of space. In Philadelphia, outreach teams have found people trying to survive in 20 below wind chills, using only cardboard and blankets. Recovery from this crisis is going to take months, even after the weather pattern finally shifts. Repairing hundreds of water main breaks, replacing damaged power infrastructure, clearing debris from wind and ice damage, and addressing the economic impacts on businesses and families will extend well into spring and summer. We are witnessing a winter weather pattern operating outside the bounds of what most emergency management systems were designed to handle. The combination of extreme cold, massive snowfall, ice accumulation, and hurricane-force winds in rapid succession has overwhelmed response capabilities across multiple states simultaneously. The bottom line is this: we are in the middle of a historic winter weather crisis that has already claimed 153 lives and caused billions in damage, with the atmospheric conditions driving it far from finished. The polar vortex split happening right now around February 15th means the most dangerous phase could still be ahead of us. The next few weeks will determine whether this becomes a winter that gets talked about for decades, or something even more significant. Stay safe, stay informed, and please look out for people in your community who might need help getting through what is still to come. This winter has already rewritten the record books, and it is not done with us yet. Breaking update. The polar vortex just officially split into two cores today, and this winter crisis has now claimed 153 lives, making it deadlier than any winter event we have seen in 5 years. But here is what has me genuinely concerned. While everyone is focused on the record-breaking cold hitting major cities, there is a hidden humanitarian disaster unfolding right now as hundreds of thousands of our most vulnerable neighbors fight for survival, with shelters at maximum capacity and nowhere safe to go. What happened over the past 72 hours changed everything. The stratospheric sudden warming event that meteorologists have been tracking has just reached a tipping point. Temperatures 30 kilometers above the Arctic spiked by over 50 degrees Celsius, completely shattering the polar vortex into separate pieces. One core is now sitting over northern Canada, the other core is over Eurasia. This breakdown is pushing Arctic air masses into places where they have no business being. The homeless crisis happening right now is heartbreaking. In New York City, outreach teams have found 17 people who sadly did not survive the extreme conditions since mid-January. Shelters from Atlanta to Boston are at absolute capacity, with waiting lists growing longer every night. Chicago opened additional overnight warming centers as wind chills hit -40, but they are still turning away hundreds of people who have nowhere else to go. Boston and Philadelphia are reporting the same thing. People are being told there is no room, while temperatures can end a life within hours. Where are you watching from, and what is the situation like in your area? Are local shelters overwhelmed where you live? Have you seen people in your community struggling to find warm places to stay? Let me know in the comments, because understanding how widespread this crisis really is helps everyone grasp the scope of what we are dealing with. Right now, 43 million Americans are under extreme cold warnings. Central Park in Manhattan recorded 3 degrees yesterday morning, which was colder than Antarctica at the exact same time. Dallas has been below freezing for over 200 consecutive hours. But what makes this truly unprecedented is how it is affecting states that rarely see this kind of extreme weather. Florida just experienced record-breaking lows across every climate monitoring site for 2 straight days. Melbourne dropped to 24 degrees, an all-time February low. Fort Pierce recorded 23 degrees, also setting an all-time February record. Snow flurries appeared in Tampa Bay and Sarasota for the first time since 2010. Cold, stunned iguanas were falling from trees across South Florida, with one wildlife removal company collecting 2,500 of them in just 2 days. Tennessee suffered some of the worst infrastructure damage we have seen. Nashville Electric Service reported peak outages affecting 235,000 customers, roughly half their entire service territory. Recovery has stretched across multiple weeks, with over 27,000 customers still in the dark by early February. The National Guard had to clear 650 miles of roads while conducting welfare checks on people trapped in their homes. Families were spending $400 or more on propane and generators just to avoid freezing inside their own houses. Mississippi officials called this the worst winter storm since 1994. Nearly 300,000 customers lost power, with 25,000 still without electricity almost 2 weeks after the initial storm hit. But here is some hope. Texas, which faced devastating grid failures during a similar storm in 2021, actually held strong this time. Battery storage had increased from 220 megawatts to 17,000 megawatts, and at peak demand, batteries supplied 9.5% of total grid power. It proves that lessons learned from past disasters can make a real difference. The Northeast has been dealing with cold that just will not quit. Washington, D.C. endured 233 consecutive hours below freezing, the longest streak since 1989. New York City deployed 60 warming shelters and 20 warming buses that circulated continuously, but the demand far exceeded what they could handle. This has potentially been the longest consecutive freezing period in the city's recorded history. For people experiencing homelessness, this has been a true life or death situation that is getting worse. Social workers are reporting individuals with progressive hypothermia and frostbite from repeated exposure to these extreme conditions. Many people are avoiding overcrowded shelters due to safety concerns, making the difficult choice to risk the deadly cold rather than face potentially dangerous conditions inside. Detroit opened school gymnasiums as emergency warming centers, but many people could not reach them safely through the hazardous conditions. The Great Lakes region has seen both fascinating and incredibly dangerous conditions. Lake Erie froze to 95% coverage, effectively shutting down lake-effect snow for western New York. But the persistent cold created other serious problems. Chicago experienced its coldest weather in 7 years, with O'Hare Airport logging 500 delays and over 50 cancellations on a single day. Grand Rapids recorded minus 19 degrees, the coldest reading since 1994. Here's what really shows the scope of this crisis. The economic damage is staggering and still climbing. Natural gas prices surged 78% as heating demand skyrocketed and production facilities froze up. Nearly 21 gigawatts of power generation went offline. Total flight cancellations from the storm sequence exceeded 17,700. Some airlines called this the most disruptive weather event in their entire operational history. Infrastructure is failing in ways that show how unprepared we are for sustained extreme cold. Baltimore reported 160 water main breaks since late January. Cincinnati saw 80 breaks as old cast iron pipes buckled under temperatures they were not designed to handle. These are not just statistics. These are families without water while dealing with sub-freezing temperatures inside their homes. Now here is what everyone needs to understand about what is happening next, and this is the most important part. The stratospheric sudden warming event is not a one-time occurrence. It is an ongoing atmospheric disruption. The polar vortex split that occurred around February 15th has created instability that could trigger additional Arctic outbreaks through the rest of winter and into early March. Please share this video right now if you think people in your area need to know what is coming. The more people who understand the scope of this ongoing crisis and what meteorologists are forecasting for the next few weeks, the better prepared everyone can be for what is ahead. For the next week or so, we are going to see some temporary relief. Pacific air will moderate eastern temperatures through mid-February. Cities that have been stuck in deep freezes will finally get a break, with highs rebounding from single digits to the 30s and the 40s. But this is not the end of the story. The real concern is what happens in late February and early March. The atmospheric interference that is currently shielding us from the full effects of that stratospheric warming will not last forever. Weather models are already showing signals for the potential return of severe cold in the final week of February. The polar vortex disruption could bring additional rounds of dangerous Arctic air just when everyone thinks winter is finally winding down. What makes this particularly concerning for our homeless populations is that repeated exposure to extreme cold weakens the body's ability to cope with each subsequent cold wave. The brief warm-up will not be enough for people to fully recover before the next potential Arctic blast. Emergency shelter coordinators are telling me they are seeing people with conditions that get worse each time temperatures drop. Here is something that really drives home how extreme this pattern has been. While the eastern half of the country was experiencing record-breaking cold, the western United States was hitting temperature records in the opposite direction. Montana reached 70 degrees on the same day that Florida was breaking cold records. Los Angeles hit 88 degrees, hotter than typical summer days. 5 Montana cities recorded their warmest November through January period in weather history. The West also recorded the lowest snow cover in satellite records dating back to 2001. Oregon, Colorado, and Utah all reported record-low statewide snowpack. The Sierra Nevada is sitting at just 50 to 70% of normal. While the East was buried in snow and ice, the West was experiencing drought conditions that could affect water supplies for millions of people this summer. The science behind all of this points to some really significant changes in how our atmosphere behaves. When Arctic sea ice is at record low levels, which it currently is, it weakens the temperature differences that normally keep the jet stream stable. Add unusually warm Gulf of Mexico waters, running around 72 degrees Fahrenheit in January, and you get the perfect setup for these explosive storm systems we have been seeing. Recent research suggests that polar vortex disruptions like this are becoming more frequent. While Earth is unequivocally warming, severe winter weather events are not disappearing. They might actually become more intense, even as they become less frequent. It is a complex relationship between Arctic warming and weather patterns that scientists are still working to understand. Emergency response teams have worked under incredibly dangerous conditions throughout this crisis. The National Guard activated over 5,000 members across 15 states. FEMA deployed 900 staff members and pre-positioned 7 million meals, 3 million liters of water, and over 650,000 blankets. This represents one of the largest federal emergency responses for a weather event in recent memory. But the response to help homeless populations has been completely overwhelmed. Cities like Seattle, Portland, and Denver opened additional emergency shelters, but demand exceeded capacity by hundreds of people each night. The brief pattern change coming in mid-February might provide some relief, but it will not address the underlying shortage of safe, warm places for people to stay when the next cold wave arrives. The recovery process is going to take months, even after the weather pattern finally shifts permanently. Repairing hundreds of water main breaks, replacing damaged power infrastructure, clearing debris from wind and ice damage, and addressing the economic impacts on businesses and families will extend well into spring and summer. For the immediate future, folks in the Pacific Northwest and Northern California should prepare for a beneficial storm from February 13th to February 15th. This could help with the severe drought and low snowpack conditions that have developed. But the Northeast needs to stay alert for a potentially significant winter storm from February 15th to February 21st. Models are showing signals, but the track and timing remain highly uncertain. What we're witnessing is a winter weather pattern operating outside the bounds of what most emergency management systems were designed to handle. The combination of extreme cold, massive snowfall, ice accumulation, and hurricane-force winds in rapid succession has overwhelmed response capabilities across multiple states simultaneously. The bottom line is this: we are in the middle of a historic winter weather crisis that has already taken 153 lives and caused billions in damage, with our most vulnerable neighbors bearing the worst impacts. The atmospheric conditions driving it are not finished with us yet. The next few weeks will determine whether this becomes a winter that gets remembered for decades or something even more significant. Stay safe, stay informed, and please look out for people in your community who might need help getting through what is still to come. Breaking news just came in. This winter crisis has now taken 153 lives, with homeless populations bearing the worst impact as shelters overflow and outreach teams work around the clock to save people from freezing temperatures that have made New York City literally colder than Antarctica. What we are seeing right now is not just extreme weather, it is a complete atmospheric breakdown that is rewriting the rules of winter in America. Folks, I need to tell you something. Meteorologists are calling unprecedented. Right now, as I speak to you, we have a confirmed polar vortex split happening around February 15th that is going to change everything about the rest of this winter. 43 million Americans are under extreme cold warnings. The homeless community is facing a genuine survival crisis as temperatures plunge to levels that can kill within hours of exposure. Where are you watching from right now? Share your location and tell me what you are seeing. The scope of this emergency spans from Florida breaking century-old cold records to Montana hitting 70 degrees on the same day. I want to know how this is affecting your area and if you are seeing anything like what I am about to show you. This morning, Central Park recorded 3 degrees Fahrenheit. That is colder than McMurdo Station in Antarctica at the exact same time. Dallas has been below freezing for over 200 consecutive hours. Miami just shattered temperature records that stood for 116 years. But here is what is really terrifying. The atmospheric engine driving all of this is just getting started. The homeless crisis unfolding across America right now is heartbreaking. In New York City alone, outreach teams have found 17 people who did not survive the cold since January 19th. Shelters from Atlanta to Boston are at maximum capacity, with waiting lists growing longer every night. Chicago opened additional overnight warming centers as wind chills hit -40, but thousands of people are still sleeping outdoors with nowhere safe to go. Nashville and Memphis have outreach teams working 24/7, but they are telling me there simply are not enough beds for everyone who needs them. If you are finding this information crucial right now, especially with everything that is happening, hit that like button and share this immediately. People need to understand the scope of what we are dealing with, and having real-time information could literally save lives. Let me break down exactly what happened to create this crisis, because the meteorology is absolutely shocking. We were hit by 3 separate storm systems in just 17 days. Those were winter storms, Fern and Gianna, followed by the most brutal Arctic blast in years. At peak impact, this covered more territory under winter storm warnings than any weather event in recorded history. We are talking about a nearly 2,000-mile stretch affecting 230 million Americans. Winter Storm Fern kicked things off on January 23rd, but before anyone could recover, Winter Storm Gianna formed as what scientists call a bomb cyclone off the Carolina coast. It was so intense that the Air Force flew Hurricane Hunter aircraft into it. They almost never do that for winter storms. The storm underwent explosive cyclogenesis, with its central pressure dropping 30 millibars in 24 hours. That pressure fall was 67% beyond the threshold for bomb cyclone classification. Here is where it gets really wild. While the eastern half of the country was experiencing record-breaking cold, the western United States was hitting temperature records in the opposite direction. Montana reached 70 degrees. Los Angeles hit 88 degrees, hotter than typical summer days. The temperature contrast was so extreme that we literally had record heat and record cold happening simultaneously in the same country. Comment below and tell me what your biggest concern is right now: power outages, travel safety, or just getting through more weeks of dangerous cold. Your local perspective helps everyone understand how widespread these impacts really are, and I read every single comment. Now let's talk about what's happening state by state, because this is affecting people differently depending on where you live. Florida experienced some of the most bizarre conditions imaginable. Every single official climate monitoring site broke or tied record lows for 2 consecutive days. Melbourne hit 24 degrees Fahrenheit, an all-time February low. Fort Pierce recorded 23 degrees Fahrenheit, also setting an all-time February record. But here's something that shows you just how extreme this got. Snow flurries were spotted in Tampa Bay and Sarasota for the first time since 2010. Cold-stunned iguanas were literally falling from trees across South Florida. One wildlife removal company collected 2,500 iguanas in just 2 days. These animals shut down completely when temperatures dropped below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Tennessee took the worst hit for infrastructure damage. Nashville Electric Service reported peak outages of 235,000 customers, roughly half their entire service territory. Recovery stretched across the entire first week of February, with over 27,000 customers still in the dark by February 7th. The Tennessee National Guard had to clear 650 miles of roads while conducting welfare checks on people trapped in their homes. Share this video right now with anyone who needs to know what's coming next, because the forecast for the rest of February and early March could affect millions more people. The information about this polar vortex split is something everyone needs to understand. Mississippi officials called this the worst winter storm since 1994. Nearly 300,000 customers lost power, with 25,000 still without electricity on February 5th, almost 2 weeks after the initial storm hit. Families were spending $400 or more on propane and generators just to keep from freezing in their own homes. But here's some good news that shows infrastructure can be improved. Texas. Remember the devastating grid failures during Winter Storm Uri in 2021? This time, the grid held strong. Battery storage increased from 220 megawatts to 17,000 megawatts. At peak demand, batteries supplied 9.5% of total grid power. It proves that lessons learned from past disasters can make a real difference when properly implemented. The Northeast faced cold that just would not quit. Washington, D.C. endured 233 consecutive hours below freezing, the longest streak since 1989. New York City deployed 60 warming shelters and 20 warming buses that circulated continuously, but the demand far exceeded capacity. Mayor's officials reported this as potentially the longest consecutive freezing period in the city's recorded history. For our most vulnerable neighbors experiencing homelessness, this has been a true life or death situation. Boston shelters reported turning away people every night because they simply ran out of space. In Philadelphia, outreach teams found people trying to survive in 20 below wind chills using only cardboard and blankets. Detroit opened school gymnasiums as emergency warming centers, but many people could not reach them safely through the dangerous conditions. Tell me in the comments what you are seeing in your community. Are local shelters at capacity? Have you seen people struggling with the cold who need help? Sometimes the most important thing we can do is share information about resources and look out for each other. The Great Lakes region saw conditions that were both fascinating and incredibly dangerous. Lake Erie froze to 95% coverage, effectively shutting down lake-effect snow for western New York. But the persistent cold created other problems. Chicago experienced its coldest weather in 7 years, with O'Hare Airport logging 500 delays and over 50 cancellations on February 7th alone. Grand Rapids, Michigan recorded minus 19 degrees, the coldest reading since 1994. The economic damage is staggering and still climbing. Natural gas prices surged 78% as heating demand skyrocketed and production facilities froze up. Nearly 21 gigawatts of power generation went offline. Total flight cancellations from both storms exceeded 17,700. Some airlines called this the most disruptive weather event in their entire operational history. Infrastructure is failing in ways that show how unprepared we are for extreme cold. Baltimore reported 160 water main breaks since late January. Cincinnati saw 80 breaks as old cast iron pipes buckled under temperatures they were not designed to handle. These are not just numbers. These are families without water in sub-freezing temperatures. Now here's what everyone needs to understand about what's happening next, and this is critical. The stratospheric sudden warming event is not just meteorologist jargon. It is a confirmed atmospheric disruption that is reshaping weather patterns across the northern hemisphere. Temperature anomalies in the stratosphere are running 40 degrees Celsius above normal. The polar vortex is literally splitting into two cores around February 15th. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications on because we are tracking multiple developing situations that could affect millions of people over the next month. The confirmed polar vortex split and the potential for severe weather through March mean having real-time updates could be crucial for your safety and planning. For the next week or so, we are going to see some relief. Pacific air is going to moderate eastern temperatures through mid-February. Cities that have been stuck in deep freezes will finally get a break, with highs rebounding from single digits to the 30s and 40s. But folks, this is temporary relief, not the end of the story. The real concern is what happens in late February and early March. The atmospheric interference that is currently shielding us from the full effects of the stratospheric warming will not last forever. Weather models are already showing signals for the potential return of severe cold in the final week of February. The polar vortex disruption could bring additional rounds of dangerous Arctic air just when everyone thinks winter is winding down. What makes this particularly dangerous for homeless populations is that repeated exposure to extreme cold makes people more vulnerable, weakening the body's ability to cope with each subsequent cold wave. Emergency shelter coordinators report seeing people with frostbite, signs of hypothermia, and respiratory issues that worsen each time temperatures fall. The brief warm-up will not be enough for people to fully recover before the next potential Arctic blast. Here's something that really shows how extreme this pattern has been. The western United States recorded a record low in snow cover in satellite records dating back to 2001. Oregon, Colorado, and Utah all reported record low statewide snowpack. The Sierra Nevada is sitting at just 50 to 70% of normal. While the East was buried in snow and ice, the West was experiencing drought conditions that could affect water supplies for millions of people this summer. Like and share this quickly if you want to help get this information out there. The more people who understand what we're dealing with, the better prepared everyone can be for what's ahead. The science behind all of this points to some really significant changes in how our atmosphere behaves. When Arctic sea ice is at record low levels, which it currently is, it weakens the temperature differences that normally keep the jet stream stable. Add in unusually warm Gulf of Mexico waters running around 72 degrees in January, and you get the perfect setup for these explosive storm systems. Recent research suggests that polar vortex disruptions like this are becoming more frequent. While Earth is unequivocally warming, severe winter weather events are not disappearing. They might actually become more intense, even as they become less frequent. It is a complex relationship between Arctic warming and weather patterns that we are still working to understand. Emergency response teams worked under incredibly dangerous conditions throughout this crisis. The National Guard activated over 5,000 members across 15 states. FEMA deployed 900 staff members and prepositioned 7 million meals, 3 million liters of water, and over 650,000 blankets. This represents one of the largest federal emergency responses to a weather event in recent memory. But the response to help homeless populations has been overwhelmed. Cities like Seattle, Portland, and Denver opened additional emergency shelters, but demand exceeded capacity by hundreds of people each night. Social workers report that some individuals experiencing homelessness are avoiding overcrowded shelters due to safety concerns, choosing to risk the cold instead. Drop a comment and let me know what you think needs to happen to better protect vulnerable people during extreme weather events like this. Are there solutions your community has found that work? How can we do better when the next crisis hits? The recovery process is going to take months, even after the weather pattern finally shifts. Repairing hundreds of water main breaks, replacing damaged power infrastructure, clearing debris from wind and ice damage, and addressing the economic impacts on businesses and families will extend well into spring and summer. Recovery and repair will be long-term efforts. For the immediate future, the Pacific Northwest and Northern California should prepare for beneficial storm activity from February 13th to February 15th. This could help with the severe drought and low snowpack conditions that have developed. The Northeast needs to stay alert for a potentially significant winter storm from February 15th to February 21st. Be alert and ready. Here is what makes the next phase particularly concerning. The February 15th polar vortex split could create a pattern where Arctic air becomes even more unstable. Instead of staying locked in the Arctic where it belongs, we could see repeated southward plunges of extremely cold air through the rest of winter and into early spring. Share this with your family and friends, because what is coming could affect millions more people. Understanding the scope of this ongoing crisis and the potential for additional severe weather is something everyone needs to know about. Share this information. One thing that is particularly troubling is how this cold pattern is interacting with existing vulnerabilities in our infrastructure and social support systems. Power grids that performed well during milder winters are being pushed beyond their design limits. Homeless shelters operating at normal capacity become dangerously overcrowded during extended cold periods. Transportation networks that can handle typical winter weather shut down completely under these extreme conditions. Power grids and shelters are at risk. What we are witnessing is a winter weather pattern operating outside the bounds of what most emergency management systems were designed to handle. The combination of extreme cold, massive snowfall, ice accumulation, and hurricane-force winds in rapid succession has overwhelmed response capabilities across multiple states simultaneously. The bottom line is this: we are in the middle of a historic winter weather crisis that has already taken 153 lives and caused billions in damage, with our most vulnerable neighbors bearing the worst impacts. The atmospheric conditions driving it are not finished with us yet. The next few weeks will determine whether this becomes a winter that gets remembered for decades or something even more significant. Stay safe, stay informed, and please look out for people in your community who might need help getting through what is still to come. Just got word from meteorologists. This winter crisis has claimed 153 lives and counting, making it the deadliest winter event in 5 years. What we are witnessing right now across the United States is not just another cold snap. This is a polar vortex collapse that is fundamentally reshaping weather patterns from Florida to Montana, and the worst part is, it is far from over. Right now, as I'm recording this, 43 million people are under extreme cold warnings. New York City just recorded 3 degrees, colder than Antarctica. That's not a typo. The Big Apple is literally colder than the South Pole today. Dallas has been below freezing for over 200 hours straight. Miami broke temperature records that stood for over a century. And here's what's really concerning. The atmospheric engine driving all of this is a confirmed stratospheric warming event that is splitting the polar vortex in half around February 15th. Drop your location in the comments and tell me what you are seeing right now. Are you dealing with record cold, power outages, or have things started warming up where you are? I want to know how this is affecting your area specifically. The numbers coming out of this crisis are staggering. 3 separate storm systems hit back-to-back over 17 days. Winter storms Fern and Gianna, followed by the most brutal Arctic blast we have seen in years. At peak impact, this covered more territory under winter storm warnings than any weather event on record. We are talking about a nearly 2,000-mile stretch affecting 230 million Americans. Let's talk about what actually happened here, because the meteorology is absolutely wild. Winter Storm Fern kicked things off on January 23rd, dumping ice and snow from Texas all the way to Maine. But before anyone could recover, Winter Storm Gianna formed as what's called a bomb cyclone off the Carolina coast. This thing was so intense that the Air Force actually flew Hurricane Hunter aircraft into it, something they rarely do for winter storms. Here's what makes Gianna so unprecedented. It underwent what meteorologists call explosive cyclogenesis, with its central pressure dropping 30 millibars in 24 hours. That's 67% beyond the threshold for bomb cyclone classification. The storm formed at an unusually low latitude off Georgia and exploded into a full-fledged monster in under a day. Charlotte, North Carolina picked up 11 inches of snow, tying a record from 1880. That is a 146-year-old record. But here is where it gets really crazy. While the eastern half of the country was freezing, the west was experiencing the exact opposite. Montana hit 70 degrees. Los Angeles reached 88, hotter than typical summer days. 5 Montana cities recorded their warmest November through January period in weather history. The temperature contrast was so extreme that we had record heat and record cold happening simultaneously in the same country. If you are finding this information helpful, especially with everything that is happening weather-wise right now, hit that like button and share this with anyone who needs to know what is coming. This pattern is affecting millions of people, and having real-time updates could be crucial for planning and safety. Now let's break down what happened state by state, because the scope of this is mind-blowing. Florida experienced some of the most bizarre conditions. Every single official climate monitoring site broke or tied record lows for 2 consecutive days. Melbourne hit 24 degrees, an all-time February low. Fort Pierce recorded 23 degrees, also an all-time February record. Snow flurries were spotted in Tampa Bay and Sarasota for the first time since 2010. Cold-stunned iguanas were literally falling from trees across South Florida. One wildlife removal company collected 2,500 iguanas in just 2 days. Tennessee bore the absolute worst of the ice damage. Nashville Electric Service reported peak outages of 235,000 customers, roughly half their entire service territory. Recovery stretched across the entire first week of February. Even by February 7th, over 27,000 customers were still in the dark. The Tennessee National Guard cleared 650 miles of road while conducting welfare checks on stranded residents. Mississippi called this the worst winter storm since 1994. Nearly 300,000 customers lost power, with 25,000 still without electricity on February 5th, almost 2 weeks after the initial storm. Families were spending $400 or more on propane and generators just to stay warm. But here's something that gives you hope about infrastructure improvements. Texas. Remember the devastating grid failures during Winter Storm Uri in 2021? This time, the grid held strong. Battery storage surged from 220 megawatts to 17,000 megawatts. At peak demand, batteries supplied 9.5% of grid power. It is proof that lessons learned from past disasters can make a real difference. The Northeast faced persistent, bone-deep cold that just would not quit. Washington, D.C. endured 233 consecutive hours below freezing, the longest streak since 1989. New York City experienced its coldest winter in over 20 years, with the mayor reporting 17 people found outdoors who did not survive the extreme conditions. Share this video with your family and friends, because what is coming next could affect millions more people. The information about the polar vortex split and potential late February weather patterns is something everyone needs to understand. Here is what is really heartbreaking about this crisis: the impact on our most vulnerable populations. Homeless shelters from Atlanta to Boston reported being at capacity for weeks. New York City deployed 60 warming shelters and 20 warming buses that circulated continuously. Chicago opened additional overnight warming centers as wind chills hit -40 degrees. In cities like Nashville and Memphis, outreach teams worked around the clock to bring people indoors, but many individuals experiencing homelessness still faced life-threatening conditions with no reliable shelter options. The Great Lakes region saw some fascinating but dangerous conditions. Lake Erie froze to 95% coverage, effectively shutting down lake-effect snow for western New York. Chicago experienced its coldest weather in 7 years, with O'Hare Airport logging 500 delays and over 50 cancellations on February 7th alone. Grand Rapids, Michigan recorded -19 degrees, the coldest reading since 1994. Meanwhile, the economic damage was severe and still climbing. Natural gas prices surged 78% as demand skyrocketed and production facilities froze. Nearly 21 gigawatts of power generation went offline. Total flight cancellations from both storms exceeded 17,700. Some airlines called this the most disruptive weather event in their history. Baltimore reported 160 water main breaks. Cincinnati saw 80 breaks as old infrastructure buckled under the extreme cold. Now, here is what everyone needs to understand about what is coming next. The stratospheric sudden warming event I mentioned earlier is not just meteorological jargon, it is a confirmed atmospheric disruption that is reshaping weather patterns. Temperature anomalies in the stratosphere are running 40 degrees Celsius above normal. The polar vortex is literally splitting into two cores around February 15th. For the next week or so, we are actually going to see some relief. Pacific air is going to moderate eastern temperatures through mid-February. Highs should rebound from single digits to the 30s and 40s. Cities that have been stuck in deep freezes will finally get a break. But folks, this is temporary relief, not the end of the story. The real concern is what happens in late February and early March. The atmospheric interference that is currently shielding us from the full effects of that stratospheric warming will not last forever. Weather models are already flagging the potential for new Arctic outbreaks in the final week of February. The polar vortex disruption could bring additional rounds of severe cold just when everyone thinks winter is winding down. What is your biggest concern about the next few weeks? Drop a comment and let me know if it is potential power outages, travel conditions, or just dealing with more extreme temperatures. I read every single comment, and your local perspective helps everyone understand how widespread these impacts really are. Here is something that really drives home how extreme this pattern has been. The western United States recorded the lowest snow cover in satellite records dating back to 2001. Oregon, Colorado, and Utah all reported record-low statewide snowpack. The Sierra Nevada is sitting at just 50 to 70% of normal. While the East was buried in snow and ice, the West was experiencing drought conditions that could affect water supplies for millions of people this summer. The science behind all of this points to some really significant changes in how our atmosphere behaves. When Arctic sea ice is at record low levels, which it currently is, it weakens the temperature differences that normally keep the jet stream stable. Add in unusually warm Gulf of Mexico waters running around 72 degrees in January, and you get the perfect setup for these explosive storm systems. Climate scientists are studying whether polar vortex disruptions like this are becoming more common. Recent research suggests that while Earth is unequivocally warming, severe winter weather events are not going away. In fact, they might become more intense even as they become less frequent. It is a complex relationship between Arctic warming and mid-latitude weather patterns that we are still working to understand. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on, because we are tracking multiple developing weather situations over the next several weeks. With the confirmed polar vortex split happening around February 15th and the potential for additional severe weather through March, having real-time updates could be really important for your safety and planning. The human cost of this crisis extends far beyond the statistics. Families in Tennessee spent their life savings on generators and hotel rooms during 2-week power outages. School districts from Texas to Maine closed for extended periods, affecting millions of students. Small businesses, especially those dependent on daily foot traffic, saw revenue plummet during the extended cold period. Healthcare systems faced increased emergency room visits for hypothermia, carbon monoxide poisoning, and injuries from ice-related falls. Emergency response teams worked around the clock under incredibly dangerous conditions. The National Guard activated over 5,000 members across 15 states. FEMA deployed 900 staff members and pre-positioned 7 million meals, 3 million liters of water, and over 650,000 blankets. This was one of the largest federal emergency responses for a weather event in recent history. Here is what makes this situation particularly dangerous going forward. The February 15th polar vortex split could create a pattern where Arctic air becomes even more unstable. Instead of staying locked up in the Arctic where it belongs, we could see repeated southward plunges of extremely cold air through the rest of winter and into early spring. The atmospheric setup is primed for additional bomb cyclone development along the East Coast. For the immediate future, folks in the Pacific Northwest and Northern California should prepare for beneficial storm activity from February 13th to February 15th. This could help with the severe drought and low snowpack conditions. But the Northeast needs to stay alert for a potentially significant winter storm from February 15th to February 21st. Models are showing signals, but the track and timing remain highly uncertain. Tell me in the comments what you think about this whole situation. Are you prepared for potentially weeks more of dangerous weather? How is this affecting your daily life, your work, your family's routine? The pattern we are in suggests this winter is far from over, and staying informed is going to be crucial. One thing that is particularly concerning is how this cold pattern is interacting with existing vulnerabilities in our infrastructure. Power grids that performed well during milder winters are being pushed to their absolute limits. Water systems designed for typical temperature ranges are failing when pipes freeze solid for weeks at a time. Transportation networks that can handle normal winter weather are shutting down completely under these extreme conditions. The recovery process is going to take months, even after the weather pattern finally shifts. Repairing hundreds of water main breaks, replacing damaged power infrastructure, clearing debris from wind and ice damage, and addressing the economic impacts on businesses and families will extend well into spring and summer. What we are witnessing is a winter weather pattern that is operating outside the bounds of what most emergency management systems were designed to handle. The combination of extreme cold, massive snowfall, ice accumulation, and hurricane-force winds in rapid succession has overwhelmed response capabilities across multiple states simultaneously. If this information has been helpful for understanding what is happening and what might be coming next, give this video a quick like and share it with anyone who might need to know about these developing weather patterns. The more people who understand the scope of what we are dealing with, the better prepared everyone can be for what is ahead. The bottom line is this: we are in the middle of a historic winter weather crisis that has already claimed over 150 lives and caused billions in damage, and the atmospheric conditions driving it are not finished with us yet. The next few weeks will determine whether this becomes a winter that gets talked about for decades to come, or something even more significant. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep an eye on those forecasts, because this winter still has more surprises in store. What's unfolding right now is not a normal winter storm. Winter storm. Gianna just completed one of the most explosive intensifications meteorologists have seen this decade, with its central pressure plummeting 30 millibars in 24 hours. That's 25% beyond what defines a bomb cyclone, and it happened at a latitude where these systems almost never form. We're talking about a storm that developed off coastal Georgia and exploded into a full bomb cyclone in under a day, affecting over 240 million Americans from Texas to Maine. Here is what makes this so concerning. This system formed exactly where forecast models said it would not. The Air Force had to deploy a Hurricane Hunter aircraft into this developing storm, which almost never happens for winter weather. That is how uncertain forecasters were about what this storm would become. The snowfall totals are absolutely staggering across the entire Southeast and Mid-Atlantic. Faust, North Carolina, recorded 22.5 inches. Charlotte picked up 11 inches, tying a record from 1880. Tennessee got hammered, with Pigeon Forge and Jonesboro both recording 13.5 inches. South Carolina's Fingerville saw 8.4 inches. Even northern Georgia picked up 7 inches in Mount Airy. The coastal areas got hit the hardest. Pelletier on the Crystal Coast recorded 19.5 inches. Bath in Beaufort County saw 17 inches, their first foot of snow since 1958. Newport recorded 15 inches, their first foot since 1989. New Bern shattered their city record with 12.5 inches. Temperature records fell from Ohio all the way down to Miami. Miami International Airport dropped to 35 degrees, breaking a record that stood for 116 years. Palm Beach hit 31 degrees, also breaking a record from 1909. Orlando fell to 24 degrees, the coldest in roughly 90 years. Columbus, Ohio, dropped to -9 degrees, breaking a 22-year-old record. New York's Islip hit 0 degrees. The wind chills were brutal across multiple states. Chicago hit -36 degrees. Asheville saw -27 degrees, with gusts of 50 miles per hour. New Orleans dropped to -14 degrees. Atlanta warned of wind chills from -10 to 5 degrees. Drop your location in the comments right now and tell me what the current conditions are like where you're watching from. Are you dealing with lingering cold, snow on the ground in places that rarely see it, or have things started to moderate? This storm produced truly bizarre phenomena. Gulf effect snow reached as far south as Sarasota, Cape Coral, and Fort Myers, Florida. Tampa Bay saw flurries for the first time in 16 years. Cold-stunned iguanas were falling from trees across South Florida. One company collected 2,500 iguanas in 2 days. The storm reached into Canada, with Dover, Nova Scotia picking up 11 inches. Environment Canada issued warnings for Newfoundland with up to 20 inches forecast. The Bermuda Weather Service issued gale warnings as the system passed by. Now, here is what is coming next, and this is critical. The most extreme cold is going to gradually moderate across the eastern states over the next 7 days, but we are far from done. There is potential for another significant storm system to track along the eastern seaboard around February 12th through 15th. The models are showing poor agreement on exactly where that would set up, but it is something we are watching closely. What happens in the next 2 weeks could be even more concerning. We have a confirmed stratospheric warming event entering its early phase right now. Forecasts are showing a polar vortex split and collapse in mid-February. AccuWeather's Paul Pastelok is warning that the polar vortex will keep the freezer door wide open during much of February, with more winter storms likely. Here is the critical part about the next 14 days. There is a fundamental disagreement between forecast models right now. Statistical guidance suggests widespread cold outbreaks across most of the lower 48 states during February. But dynamical models are showing much warmer conditions, particularly across the southern two-thirds of the country. The next week brings gradual temperature moderation in the east, but the pattern shift brings precipitation to the Pacific Northwest and Intermountain West. The southeast may actually see 70s and isolated 80s as the warm-up progresses. But do not let that fool you. Around February 8th through 11th, we are watching for an extreme cold outbreak that could be even more intense than what we just experienced. The European model ensemble shows over 40% probability of 4 or more inches of snow across the interior mid-Atlantic and Northeast around February 12th through 15th. If you found this breakdown helpful, especially with everything developing over the next 2 weeks, make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on. We are tracking multiple developing situations, and having real-time updates could be crucial for planning and safety. The mid-February polar vortex disruption is where things get really interesting. This isn't speculation, it's a confirmed stratospheric event. However, there is uncertainty about how it translates to surface weather. The Madden-Julian Oscillation may temporarily shield the central and eastern United States from the full impact, but that connection could re-establish in the last third of February and early March. What we are potentially looking at in the next 2 weeks is this. First, a brief warm-up across much of the eastern United States early next week. Then, around February 8th, another potential extreme cold outbreak. The models disagree on intensity, but the pattern supports significant temperature drops again. The 14-day outlook shows continued uncertainty. The ECMWF and the GFS models disagree on jet stream positioning and storm tracks. The Weather Prediction Center is using a blend of 40% ECMWF, 40% GFS, and 20% Canadian models because of this disagreement. Send this to anyone who needs to know what's potentially coming in the next 2 weeks. The polar vortex collapse could deliver another round of extreme cold in late February, or atmospheric interference could mute the signal. Either way, this winter pattern is far from exhausted. Flight impacts have been massive. Over 2,500 flights were canceled on January 31st alone. Atlanta's airport had 500 cancellations by mid-morning. When you combine ongoing power outages with Nashville Electric Service telling customers they will not have full restoration until February 9th, that is, 2 weeks without power in dangerous conditions. Are you prepared for what could be weeks more of dangerous cold and potentially more winter storms? Let me know in the comments what your biggest concern is for the next 2 weeks. The confirmed polar vortex disruption means we are likely not done with extreme weather. The pattern we are in suggests February could bring additional rounds of severe winter weather across large portions of the country. What makes this particularly concerning for the next 14 days is that we are dealing with a pattern that is not weakening. The Arctic sea ice is at record low extent for this time of year. Gulf of Mexico waters are still running around 72 degrees. The atmospheric setup that created this bomb cyclone is still in place, and the confirmed stratospheric warming could amplify it even further in the coming weeks. November 17th, 2013. Joey Davidson is huddled in the basement of his 3-story home in Washington, Illinois, his 2 young children pressed underneath him as the walls begin to shake. Above him, he hears the roof tear away. Then the top floor disappears. And then utter chaos. Cinder blocks rain down on top of him as the most powerful November tornado in Illinois history tears his home apart in a matter of seconds. It is mid-November in the heartland. Thanksgiving is just 10 days away. Nobody is thinking about tornadoes. But on this quiet Sunday morning, the atmosphere is hiding a terrifying secret, and by the end of the day, over 70 tornadoes will rip across 7 states in the deadliest and costliest November tornado outbreak in Illinois history. 5 days earlier, meteorologists at the Storm Prediction Center begin monitoring a developing weather pattern moving across the western United States. A massive trough of low pressure is carving its way eastward from the Rockies toward the Great Lakes, dragging behind it a belt of extremely fast-moving upper-level winds. Normally, in mid-November, this would not be cause for major alarm. The cold autumn air across the Midwest typically lacks the warmth and moisture needed to fuel severe thunderstorms, let alone tornadoes. However, this system is different. Ahead of the approaching trough, a powerful surge of unseasonably warm and humid air from the Gulf of Mexico is being pulled northward deep into the heartland, pushing temperatures into the low 70s across central Illinois. Dew points are climbing into the mid-60s, values more typical of a May afternoon than a November morning. This dangerously unstable air mass, combined with the incredibly strong jet stream winds racing overhead, is creating an environment loaded with both atmospheric instability and extreme wind shear, the two critical ingredients needed for the formation of violent rotating thunderstorms called supercells. Recognizing that these conditions are becoming increasingly favorable for a significant tornado outbreak, the Storm Prediction Center takes the extraordinary step of issuing a high risk for severe weather across parts of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, the latest in the year such a high risk has ever been issued for the Midwest. Included in this outlook is a 30% chance of tornadoes, with a notation that long-track, intense tornadoes are possible. For many residents across the region, however, it is a lazy Sunday morning. Some are in church. Others are watching the Bears game. Severe weather in November just does not happen here. At least, that is what everyone thought. By late morning on November 17th, the capping inversion begins to erode as the cold front races eastward. Discrete supercell thunderstorms erupt across the length of Illinois, firing one after another in a dangerous line stretching hundreds of miles. Recognizing the immediate threat, the Storm Prediction Center issues back-to-back, particularly dangerous situation tornado watches for Illinois and Indiana, warning of the likelihood of several intense, long-track tornadoes. However, many residents, unaccustomed to severe weather this late in the year, underestimate the danger. Some do not have weather radios. Others dismiss the warnings entirely. They have no idea what is about to happen. At 10:59 a.m., the first killer tornado of the day touches down 2.5 miles southeast of North Pekin, Illinois. Quickly intensifying as it moves to the northeast, the tornado crosses Interstate 474 at EF2 strength, tearing into the outskirts of East Peoria, destroying 20 homes and causing major damage to 75 more. But the tornado is only getting started. Continuing to strengthen with every passing second, the massive supercell drives the tornado directly into the heart of Washington, Illinois, a city of 16,000 people. At 11:06 a.m., the tornado becomes violent, reaching EF4 intensity with winds estimated at 190 miles per hour, the strongest November tornado ever recorded in the state of Illinois. Entire subdivisions disintegrate as the half-mile-wide tornado carves a path straight through the center of town. Along Mackenzie Street, a row of well-constructed homes is completely obliterated, every single structure swept clean off its foundation, the debris granulated into tiny, unrecognizable fragments. On Coventry Drive, another row of homes simply vanishes, leaving behind nothing but bare concrete slabs and debarked trees. Nearly 5,000 people are directly in the tornado's path. It's at this moment, on Fayette Avenue, that 82-year-old Rosamond Allison is sheltering in her home when the tornado strikes. The structure is no match for the EF4 winds and is completely destroyed around her. Rosamond initially survives, pulled from the wreckage by rescuers, but the injuries she sustains are severe. 11 days later, she will pass away, becoming one of 3 people killed by the Washington tornado. Just a few blocks away, Joey Davidson and his wife Ashley are in the basement of their 3-story home with their 2 young children when the tornado passes directly overhead. They hear the roof go first, then the top floor. Then the world becomes nothing but flying cinder blocks and chaos. Ashley holds the children beneath her, while Joey shields them from above, his vertebra and shoulder fracturing as debris slams into his back. As long as he can hear his children crying, he knows they are alive. Despite his injuries, Joey claws his way out of the mountain of debris, driven by one thought: getting his kids to safety. The entire neighborhood around them is gone. Cars are mangled beyond recognition. Trees are stripped bare. Personal documents and photographs are carried by the winds over 80 miles away, found days later in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. Before we get into the rest of the action, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank the sponsor of this video. Now, back to the outbreak. As the Washington tornado continues its 46-mile path of destruction through 4 counties, flattening farmsteads and destroying over 600 homes and businesses, the atmosphere across Illinois is only becoming more volatile. And the nightmare is far from over. At approximately noon, 150 miles to the south, a second violent tornado touches down southwest of New Minden, a tiny village of just 215 people in Washington County. A tractor trailer is blown off of Interstate 64 as the tornado rapidly intensifies, racing northeast toward the countryside. 2 miles southwest of town, the tornado reaches EF4 intensity with winds estimated at 180 miles per hour and strikes the farmstead of Joseph Hoy and his sister Frances. Joseph, 80, spent his life on that farm raising exotic birds, quail, pigeons, sometimes even ostriches. He was known across the community for his kindness, remembered by friends for knowing the names of every single member of their 200-person bird club. The decades-old farmhouse is completely swept off its foundation, leaving nothing behind but bare ground. Joseph's body is found in a field over 100 yards away. Frances, 78, is pulled from the rubble but succumbs to her injuries at the hospital. Their farm, once full of life, is reduced to barren land. The tornado continues into New Minden itself, toppling the steeple of St. John's Lutheran Church, which had just let out from Sunday services minutes earlier. In the cemetery just north of the church, 200 tombstones are knocked flat. Pastor Tim Mueller receives a frantic call from a neighbor. Something about seeing the sky through their living room. Something about the steeple. He rushes home to find his community in ruins. But the storm system is relentless. As the Washington and New Minden tornadoes carve their paths of destruction, the atmosphere across the Midwest is only becoming more volatile. The approaching cold front is accelerating eastward, interacting with the unseasonably warm and humid air mass to generate extreme amounts of low-level wind shear. Supercells erupt across Illinois and into Indiana, each one spawning tornadoes at a staggering pace. Back in Washington, Cherokee Sparks emerges from the wreckage of his leveled home. He had watched cars rolling down the road, roofs of houses flying across the street, and dump trucks being shoved back and forth before his entire home collapsed to a single wall. As the structure came apart around him, Cherokee grabbed his stepfather by the arm and dragged him to safety. Everything the family had saved and built over 39 years is gone in seconds. 100 miles to the northeast, an EF2 rips through the small community of Diamond near Joliet, destroying an entire subdivision and forcing an evacuation. Matt McCullough watches the funnel form over the fields behind his house before herding his 4-year-old son and 96-year-old grandmother into the basement. The air gets lighter. Then it goes quiet. Then he hears everything getting torn apart. An EF3 tears through Gifford in Champaign County, flattening homes and snapping trees across its path. In Indiana alone, over 30 tornadoes touch down, the largest November tornado outbreak the state has ever recorded. As the sun begins to set, the most devastating tornado of the entire outbreak strikes far to the south. A long-tracked, heavily rain-wrapped EF3 moves along the Ohio River through parts of Kentucky before crossing into Massac County, Illinois, and directly striking the small town of Brookport, population just over 1,000. The tornado tears through 2 mobile home parks and destroys dozens of homes, its winds of 140 miles per hour launching mobile homes over 100 feet from their foundations. In the rural community of Unionville, just east of town, double-wide mobile homes are completely obliterated and swept away, their debris scattered 500 feet downwind. A 7 by 12-foot concrete porch slab is lifted and moved by the force of the winds. 3 people are killed. Skolita Burrus, 63, had been widowed just 6 months earlier and was finally beginning to find happiness again, looking forward to seeing her son for Thanksgiving. Nothing is left of her home. Her car sits in the driveway, but she is gone. Kathy George, 58, who had been married for over 30 years, is also killed. Her husband Charles would later say the thing he misses most is her voice, her smile, just her being there. Robert Harmon, 56, is found at a separate location, the 3rd victim of a tornado that carved a 42-mile path of destruction along the river. By the time the last tornado dissipates over Tennessee late that evening, the outbreak has produced 77 confirmed tornadoes across 7 states, including 2 EF4 tornadoes and 3 EF3 tornadoes in Illinois alone. 32 of the tornadoes reach EF2 strength or higher, the most in any single event since the 2011 super outbreak. 8 people have lost their lives, all in Illinois. Over 200 are injured, with 125 of those injuries in Washington alone. Property damage from the tornadoes statewide reaches a staggering $1.05 billion, with over $800 million of that concentrated in the city of Washington. In the following days, Governor Pat Quinn declares 7 Illinois counties disaster areas. The National Guard deploys to assist with search and rescue. And in a decision that sparks outrage across the state, FEMA denies federal aid to the communities devastated by the outbreak, stating the damage was not severe enough to warrant assistance, a decision that leaves the mayor of Washington and state officials stunned. In the years since November 17, 2013, the communities struck by the outbreak have shown extraordinary resilience. In Washington, 1 in 20 rebuilt homes now features a reinforced concrete safe room in the basement, capable of withstanding EF4 winds. A bronze sculpture called Community Spirit stands in the center of town, a monument to what the people of Washington endured and overcame together. Gabrielle Edwards, whose home was leveled that morning, later described the strange duality of living through it. Sometimes it feels like it just happened, and other times she can't believe it even happened at all. Joey Davidson's home was rebuilt. His children are growing up safe. But the scars remain, and the empty lots that still dot certain neighborhoods serve as quiet reminders of what was lost. Every November, when the weather turns unseasonably warm and the skies darken over the Illinois prairie, the residents of these small Midwestern towns remember the day nobody expected. The day 77 tornadoes tore across the heartland in the middle of autumn and changed their lives forever.